Life is full of hard moments, unexpected challenges, unfair situations, and setbacks that make you feel stuck. And when things go wrong, it's easy to fall into that spiral of why is this happening to me? This isn't fair. It's easy to fall victim into that rabbit hole of all the things that are going wrong. But the truth is, life isn't fair. Things are going to happen to you that you didn't ask for, but what is in your control is how you respond to them. You're going to go through a lot of hard shit, and that's just a part of life. That's just life in general. There would not be the high highs if you didn't have the low lows and the hardships that taught you things. And so that's why it's important to use that and reframe the way that you see those hard things going in your life and use that as a way to fuel you and make you better and propel you forward. You always hold the power. Taking ownership of my response to everything that's happened to me was one of the most pivotal moments of my entire journey. I realized when I was at my rock bottom and depressed and working a dead end job in unfulfilled relationships, I had a big wake up call. And I realized no one's coming to save me. And I mean that in a beautiful way. It's very freeing and liberating once you realize that no one's coming to save you. There's no magic pill. No one's going to come in and teach you the way or hold your hand. It's up to you. You hold the full power to get up and take ownership and change your situation. And once you begin to do that, so many doors begin to open. And that's why I say it's liberating. Because ultimately, your situation is your responsibility and it may not be your fault. All the things that you've gone through, the trauma that you've endured is not your fault. But it is your responsibility in choosing how you respond because you can respond and play the victim and say, woe is me, and continue to stay stuck in these vicious cycles and blaming other people, other things in your situation for not taking action and changing. Or you can choose to take full ownership and responsibility and control the things you can control and take action and steps needed to move forward and get out of your situation. You don't have to wait for someone to come fix your life. You don't have to wait for permission to change. The second you decide to take full ownership of your situation, that's when everything shifts.
Yeah, I like that viewpoint that we can't always control what happens to us. And that's so true, right? There's a lot of things that happen to us in life. We have no control over, right? But we always have control over how we respond to it. Are you a big Rocky fan?
I have not seen many of those.
All right. Well, I love Rocky, especially like Rocky Four. But I love that the whole series, every Rocky. I think it was super fun. I think it was just very motivating, and you get so pumped up, and you had a lot of pro America stuff. But there's a great scene from Rocky Six, and Rocky's given a speech to his son, and it's all about like the importance of staying strong and not giving up when times get really tough. And this is kind of a famous quote, and he says it's not about how hard you hit, it's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take, keep moving forward, and he says that's how winning is done. And I mean, I'm getting the chills right now just thinking about that quote because I think it's awesome. But it's not the setbacks or the difficulties or the challenges that we face that define us, but it's really how do we respond to those, right? And it's just like what Rocky says. He says, it's about being able to take those hits. Whether that's like a failure or disappointment or a struggle, and still keep moving forward. Instead of giving up when things get really tough, you can focus on learning from that experience and continue to push towards those goals. And it's about persistence, and no matter how hard things get or how hard they may seem at that moment. I feel like if you let others or situations control your emotions, then you're giving them power over you. And instead, choose to stay strong, control your emotions, keep moving forward no matter what happens. It's really about owning those emotional reactions and not letting outside factors control how you feel or act.
Yeah, so true. This whole concept of kind of ownership and choosing how you respond to is actually part of the one key pillar of the speech that I'm writing too. So I feel like it's very fitting that we're talking about this. It's been top of mind for me a lot.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear this speech.
It's been tough though, not gonna lie. I I had the whole rough draft written and then I scrapped it all because I'm like, oh, I don't feel like aligned with it. I don't like it. So now I'm redoing it all, and so I'm not exactly where I wanted to be. I was hoping to have it written so I can like go and refine and work on how I'm delivering it and everything. But hey, it's a part of the process, and I'm just trusting that it's gonna work out how it's supposed to.
What do you think is the biggest challenge? What's been the biggest challenge for you in writing this?
I mean, a lot. I mean, one is just the time too, because I've been so busy with other stuff that I haven't had like just the pure focus and energy to devote to like
Yeah.
putting in a ton of time to that. And it does take a lot of just like getting fully dialed in mentally. But outside of that, it's just I feel a lot of pressure for it to be perfect. And I know it's not going to be perfect. It's my first speech ever. Like I don't expect it to be like all magical and beautiful and perfect. And I know that nothing is ever going to be perfect like that, but it just like it feels like a lot of pressure and because there's so many different directions I can take it and so many things that I could talk about. I'm like, what I want it to hit hard. I want to make sure that people are getting the most impact or the most value out of it. And so it just feels a lot of pressure to get it right.
Yeah. Well, and that's what we're going to be talking about today too, right? Like you're getting that pressure and you feel that anxiety and everything, and then it's like, how do I respond to that? And do I
Hmm.
respond like, I can't think of what to say. People are going to make fun of me. People are going to think I don't know how to speak, whatever. Or do you say like, one, this is the first time I've done this, or also, we'll talk about kind of like the different ways to handle this. But is that kind of been in your mind as well?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely gone on both of those sides. I go through the panic, the freak out, and down the rabbit hole, and then I catch myself. I'm like, all right, no, you got this.
Yeah.
It's gonna be fine. And then I reframe it. So I definitely cycle through those, but yeah, it's part of it.
I wonder almost sometimes if it's healthier to go through that a little bit instead of just completely like pretending there's no anxiety or fear. To better just kind of do a little freak out, panic, and be like, okay, I got that on my system. And now let's really think about what's actually happening here, or what's reality.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think in general, it's good to sit in those emotions, any sort of negative emotion, at least for a bit, but be intentional with how you're sitting in it, and then be like, all right, time to get out of it. Like we know what we need to do, and then take action on that to get out.
Yeah, yeah,
But yeah, part of I think I'll talk about this more at another time, but kind of as you know, I'm gonna try to shift a little bit more of my focus to pulling back on some of the other business stuff and not focusing as much on growing the business and really focusing on building the speech and being able to deliver the best speech I possibly can and just pouring into other areas of my life right now. So I think that that's going to help too with the speech and just where I'm at mentally and just making sure my cup is filled and making sure I'm pouring into the right things with this season of my life. And so I think that that shift is going to be good. Um, just for that and overall my well-being and how I handle stuff too.
yeah. I think it will be. I think it'll help out for sure.
Yeah, but what's been going on with you?
Uh, Not a whole lot. Things have been going well. Loving life. We were kind of talking about this the other day, and I wanted to bring this up because it's still. I mean, as much as I know this and I feel this, it still kind of blows my mind sometimes when I think about this. So it's still been very cold here, and a lot of days without a whole lot of sunshine. And even if there is, it's so cold, like you don't really want to go out. Well, the other day it warmed up a little bit, and in my backyard it tends to be warmer sometimes. It blocks some of the wind and things like that. And so I had a chance to get out and just like really soak in that sunshine for like a long time. Like I read and I was listening to a podcast and hanging out with the dogs and like, a couple hours probably. I just felt it, I just felt like that, just soaking in the sunshine. And the next day, and nothing else changed. I got about the exact same amount of sleep, nutrition, workouts, everything was the same the whole weekend. And I woke up Monday morning, and you know how sometimes Monday mornings can be. I woke up and I felt fantastic. I was like, man, I'm in a great mood. I was like, what is going on today? It's Monday, whatever. Oh, well, and the whole day I was just like, singing, humming. And I was like, like, why am I such in a good mood? And I was thinking, I think it's just because I had so much time out in the sunshine, and like it affects me that much. And even though I know that, I think about that, sometimes it just still amazes me about how much better I feel when I'm out in nature, and especially when I have sunshine, and I feel so much better just mentally, other than physically. I mean, just mentally and emotionally, I just feel so much better.
Yeah, I mean it's so healing, and it's always cool to see that because like we know that it has the benefits, but especially I feel like when you have to go through those phases when you're deprived from it, and then you
Yeah,
get it back, and it really just reminds you. It's kind of the same when you eat clean for a bit, and then you go and eat junk food, and it kind of like fucks you up, and then you're like, oh, that's why I eat clean. I
yeah,
feel like it almost kind of similar in a sense.
yeah. And then you feel so much better, like, oh, this is such a good meal. Like I feel so much better eating this.
Yeah. Well, sweet. And so, getting back into the topic as far as how we respond to stuff, I think a lot about this in my journey too, and just looking back on everything I've been through, being depressed, just the unfilling relationships, the trauma I've been through. At the time, it felt like my world was crumbling, but now I can look back and be grateful for all of it because every single hardship has shaped me into who I am today as the reason why I'm here right now, and I wouldn't change that for the world. So I think, yeah, it's easy to look back and reframe things when you're on the other side of it. Obviously, it's easy for me to look back now and be like, oh, yeah, like that all happened for a reason. But I think the real power comes when you can do that in the moment, when you can stop in that mid challenge, kind of like we were just talking about with me, the speech, and ask myself, all right, like, how can I use this? How can I grow from this? What is the reframe that I can use here? And I think that's what separates people who stay stuck from the people who build something incredible out of their struggles. Because like the depression for me, like that's what got me into the gym. That's what taught me how to build myself physically, mentally, emotionally. The failed relationships, whether that be with my family or just with romantic relationships, they taught me more about myself, what I need, about how I can show up better for other people in my life, what I want, where I need to grow mentally, emotionally. Even when I went through a whole cancer thing, and I leaned into gratitude a lot in that, and just it was the best worst case scenario that could have happened. And I also reframed it in the sense of I can better understand what a lot of clients or just people in my life that are going through similar things. I can actually understand how much of a toll it takes on them and be able to approach those relationships with more compassion and understanding. Or even when I invested basically my whole life savings. This was a couple of years back into a mentorship, and it just ended up just not being it. The promises were not fulfilled. It was just not a good situation. So I could have played the victim and be like, oh man, like they suck, whatever, and gone that down that whole rabbit hole. But instead, I'm just like, all right, it's a learning experience for me on doing more due diligence and making better decisions with where I'm investing things. And also just taught me a lot. And it was also a moment of me still betting on myself and committing to myself. And even if the investment itself wasn't worth it, I still took that step. And that is what propelled me forward, even to where I'm at now. And I think in general, like a lot of my clients, actually one of our clients the other day told me that I'm really good at reframing stuff, and I guess I never stopped to think about that in too much depth, just because it has been so automatic. But I do end up doing that with clients all the time. Like stuff comes up for them, even at just like injuries or little setbacks, and I can automatically seek out the good in it, even when things get really, really bad. And I think that that's actually become a superpower, and it's something that I love to be able to instill in more people too, because it really changes everything on how you're showing up and how you respond to stuff.
Yeah, and you're talking about reframing. I think sometimes, it's really hard for us to do that for ourselves, because it's happening to us, and it's easy to look at what the negatives are, or what could possibly be, negatives or hardships or challenges down the road. And so sometimes it really helps to have someone with you to be able to be outside of that life and be able to and look in, from a wider viewpoint and be like, look, I get that, this is a challenge that we're going through right now, but here are some things that are positives. Here are some wins that we can do. Here are some things that we can learn from it. And like you said, just reframe that in a way that that the clients say, oh, wow, you know what? You're right. We're not saying that everything's great, that everything that don't worry about it or just overlook it. But hey, we can learn a lot from this. We can move forward and we can still get to where we want to be. So I think it does help tremendously to have that support.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is good in every single situation. It's the one quote I love is what you focus on expands. If you're focusing on all the things that are going wrong, then that's all you're going to see, and you're going to go down that rabbit hole. But if you can focus on the things that are good and happening for you, even in those dark times, that is what's going to be highlighted, and that's what's going to propel you forward.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think from my personal point of view, I think sports has taught me how to handle, challenges in the best of ways. And I say best ways. I'm also, there's also things I don't handle very well, and it's funny because I think I'm opposite of what a lot of people, how they experience things. So like I handle like really important, big issues really well, whether it's like, if, job stuff or financial stuff or personal stuff, relationship, whatever, anything really big, I handle really well. It's those little tiny things that, that I get really frustrated about and I don't respond well. And I think it's partly, I think the bigger things, like I just really have that faith that I'm like, I'm going to let God take care of this. He's going to get me through it. And I guess the problem for me is sometimes I don't think about him and even the little things, even though I know he's like, dude, I'll take care of the little things too. Let me help you. It's like even just right before we got on, my internet was acting up and I was getting real frustrated. I was like, oh, what's going on? I was yelling and stuff, whatever. And I'm like, why would I get so upset? It's just something simple that I know it's going to turn back on, or like annoying traffic, things like that. And like things that are just not important at all, that's what kind of gets me. And that's where I'm like, gosh, like that's what challenges my stillness usually is those little tiny things. So that's where I personally want to say, okay, how do you need to respond to this better? Like you can't control the traffic. How can we respond to this better? How can you don't let that traffic, control how you feel that day? And so even like in the big games that I've played in sports, like I've always been like, it's just so relaxed, and I think it's just because like I'm in that moment. I just feel good. And I think also I feel like I'm more in control. Like I'm in this situation, I can do this. And I've got it. Like the bigger the game, the more, I guess, excited I get about it, but also the more calm I get once the game starts. It's like, I think about like, I like to think about sports analogies, if you're in a big game, let's say football, and you're down, 25 points or something like that, some of those big comebacks, you talk to some of those players and they're like, we just took like one first down at a time. We took it at one touchdown at a time, and you just have to get those small wins. And before you know it, you're back in the game. But you have to have that mindset that we're not giving up. The game's not over. There's still an opportunity. And no matter what happens at the end, at least you're moving forward every step and just keep going for that. And I love watching teams that don't give up. And I know a lot of people like the underdogs, things like that. But I mean, I love the teams that have that winner's mentality. And it doesn't matter whether they're down big or it's a close game at the end. Like you can just see in their eyes, like they're going to win, and it's because they have that mentality. Like we're not giving up, we can't, there's a lot of things that happen during this game, but we're not giving up. We're moving forward.
I love that perspective so much. I also think it is super interesting that like how you handled the big challenges versus small stuff. I think that's always super fascinating just on that and how people work that way. So how have you, I guess, what progress have you made? Because I know that was one of your goals too, is just that stillness and being more calm through all those little things. How's that been going? Or how do you catch yourself with those small stuff and like try to get to the places where you do with the big stuff where you're feeling more relaxed and confident?
Yeah, I think I have to be able to pause, and instead of just automatically just reacting to things, just really slow down and think about, is this really that serious an issue? Is this, if I get really upset about something, like let's kind of break this down, why I'm getting upset about it, and what's going to be, what's going to come of this, or what's the effect of this, type of thing. And then most of the time, it's really not a big deal, but I'm still doing a lot, so there's more reflection. Like, okay, I should not have handled it that way, or I should not have responded that way. Yeah, and I just have to remind myself, like, that's my ultimate goal, is just to be able to, anything happens to me, I just kind of absorb it all and accept it all and be like, okay, like, this is not going to affect me, And I used to have kind of the thought that if I wasn't getting mad about something or upset, then people didn't think that I really cared enough about it. And so, especially in sports, like, I mean, I cared so much about baseball. I want to make sure, like, hey, if I get out, know that I'm killing myself, beating myself up because I am so upset that I let my team down, type of thing. And in reality, is people, it kind of looks like you're not in control of yourself, and that's a big negative. And so that's kind of one of the things, like, I want people to look at me and say, oh, okay, look how he's handling this situation. Like, he's not getting mad, he's not getting upset, he's super calm about it. And that's what I want to do in all situations.
I love that. Yeah. And even what you said too about just pausing, giving yourself some space. I feel like that's so important, even with the big stuff too, but especially in those smaller moments.
Yeah.
And even with the big stuff, I think one thing I try to remind myself too is like really zooming out in a few months or a few years. Is this gonna matter? It's like stuff with the Wi-Fi. Like, of course that's not gonna matter. Even like the big stuff. Like for me, even this speech probably won't matter in a few years, or people are gonna forget in a few months. So in the big picture, it's not a big deal, and I feel like that kind of helps put things in perspective, at least for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. All right, so let's talk about fitness, and because this mindset applies so much to your health journey as well. So think about, how often do people start a fitness routine, and then they quit when things don't go exactly the way they either thought in their head it would go, or how they planned it, or what they thought other people would think of them, right? So something like, they miss one workout and they're like, well, I screwed up, or they miss a couple workouts. They're like, well, I'm not going to get healthier. I might as well just quit. This isn't for me, or the scale. This is a big thing, right? The scale doesn't drop super fast. And so they're like, well, this isn't working. Like whatever I'm doing is not. And then I think a lot of times they kind of add that extension like this isn't working. It'll never work for me,
Mm.
and then or they have a bad eating day, right? And they think, well, I failed this week. I screwed it up. What's the point of me doing this if every now and then I have a bad meal or if I can't control things like that? I'm always going to be like this. I'm always going to act like that. And there's a guy, Dr. Amen. Some of you guys may have heard of him. He has this thing called ANT. It's like automatic negative thoughts, right? And it kind of refers to like negative thought patterns that just automatically pop into our minds, right? And that all happens to us. And it affects our mood, it affects our behavior, how we respond to things. And a lot of times, especially with me, I catch myself doing this all the time, that those thoughts are like so unrealistic or super exaggerated, and it leads to all this stress and anxiety. And then kind of like we're talking about, and then if we zoom out, like really, was that really that big of a deal? So he encourages like identifying and challenging those, to change your thinking and improve your mental health, right? So it's like recognizing those negative thoughts and then replacing them with more positive, but I think more importantly, realistic ones. Like one thing he's talked about is just a question to ask yourself. Like when you have that response to something or fear or anxiety about something and say, okay, is that true? Like, is that really how someone might look at me or how I'm going to, respond to this or what that's going to look like next month? Is all that anxiety true? A lot of times you look back, okay, actually it's not. I blew that way out of the water, right? Or something like, I don't know, like I'm way too tired to work out today and the workout's just not going to be worth it. I'm just going to skip it, and I think a lot of people do that. And it's easy to be able to like, okay, well, I'm just going to skip that workout. And then you start falling off track, right? So I think we just need to challenge ourselves. So for example, on that one, okay, is this tiredness like temporary? Am I going to be tired later on today or later on tonight or tomorrow? Or how will I feel after that workout? Kind of turning it around and say, okay, well, what if I do that workout? I know I'm really tired, but what if I go and do that workout? Will I have more energy? Which we know the answer usually is yes, right? We're going to feel so much better. And so what's the important thing right now? Like taking care of my body or giving into that temporary feeling. So replace the thought with like, I may feel tired now, but what if I go and just do a quick workout? Maybe it's not the full workout or maybe it's not the intensity is great. But it'll probably boost my energy and I'll probably feel better. So I think that's going to help like overcome the temptation just to skip that workout. And then it encourages you doing something that's moving towards that goal.
Yeah, it's funny how we always jump to the worst case scenario.
We
And
really do.
yeah, I always catch myself like I will make up this whole scenario in my head of how things are gonna go, and it's just like the world is falling apart, everything is ruined, and I'm like, this is what's gonna happen, it's all over.
I
When in
know.
reality, we're just creating this completely false story, and we just run with it, and we let that control us.
Yeah, you're right. We can be so creative with these, well, and with the negative parts, right? Like we should be so creative with the positive. What could be great about this? We're like, oh, how horrible could this be? And we create this huge narrative, this huge story of something that people are like, what? That's never going to happen.
Yeah, and it usually never turns out that way.
Right.
Yeah, it's just funny. I always catch myself doing that. I'm like, all right, what is going on here? Is this really realistic? It's like that question you said. Is this actually true? Is this actually going to happen? And 99% of the time, no, you're just making it up.
Yeah, and I think our mind is really so powerful. And I think a lot of those athletes, when you get to those top levels, I mean, in terms of their physical ability, I mean, they're all at that same level, right? But usually what separates them is that mental side of things.
Mhm.
And so when you see a player that's like constantly comes through in the clutch, big games, and versus people that don't, or the players that you never hear of, I think it really has to do with they have that great mindset that, hey, I can do this. I'm going to do this. They probably picture themselves hitting the home run or catching the touchdown or whatever, as opposed to, the negative thoughts in their head of what if I strike out or what if I drop this ball or something like that. And to me, I think that's just a huge difference, in how consistent and how successful you are.
I aggressively agree with anything in life. It. I always say, even too, with the gym, it's more mental than it is physical. Anything the only thing limiting you is your mind, period. And so the story you tell yourself becomes your reality, whether it is that going down that whole rabbit hole of all the things that are going to go wrong, or like you said, believing yourself, visualizing the true outcome that you want. Your mind is way more powerful than you think.
Yeah. And we've talked about this before, but it's never about perfection. We're not looking for a perfect anything, right? So it's all about just how you respond to it. So if you do skip a workout, all right, cool. Get back on track tomorrow. Get it tomorrow. If the scale doesn't move, stay consistent. Trust that process. If you're doing the right things, if you're working with us, it will get there. If you overeat or you had a bad meal, okay, well, one meal is not going to define your whole journey. Just keep going. The next morning, the next day, eat the way you're supposed to eat. So you kind of shift from that like victim mode of like, why isn't this working for me? Why does this always happen to me? To like an ownership mode. So, okay, well, what do I need to do to adjust? And that's I think really when you start seeing those results, mentally and physically. Because fitness isn't about never messing up or always being perfect. That's never the case. It's just all I guess it's all about teaching yourself how to respond better every time you do make a mistake or you don't do something the way you think you should have done it.
Mm-hmm. And one thing to remind people of too is you never get to a point where you've made it in
Mm-hmm.
anything in life, whether that's dealing with mental health or just going through these spells or just how you're responding to stuff. Even like you said, like you struggle with the small things, like I struggle with the speech, like all these little things, like they still come up. We all go through it daily. And if you don't experience, like if you were happy and everything was perfect all the time and you never experienced the lows, we wouldn't have the appreciation and gratitude for that. I think the key is just having the awareness and the tools to be able to combat that stuff when they come up and getting yourself out of that mentality. Like I said, like I catch myself going down that rabbit hole. Sometimes I'll, like we said, we sit in those emotions for a little bit and then you have to catch yourself and be like, all right, this is what I'm doing to get out of it. We're reframing it. We're moving forward. So that way, one, you get stuck in that mentality for less time, but then overall, it's coming up less frequently because you're making it so automatic. One other thing too is this kind of goes on what you were saying earlier about just the stillness and the calmness. I used to be angry all the time. I would let every little thing get to me, every small inconvenience. I was just mad all the time, bad energy towards everyone and everything. Like every was all out to get me, and every inconvenience was the end of the world. It was just this big thing. And it was a miserable existence. I was just even looking back at that, it's crazy that I used to live that way. And the funny thing is, I was allowing that all to affect me in that way. And my parents are still like this still. I think that's part of the reason kind of where I adopted that almost. But it's mind blowing when I go and spend time with them, and I try to avoid it just because of that. It's just it's so unhealthy, and it's just not a happy and fulfilling way to live. You always feel like the victim. You never feel in control. And I do vividly remember that life just because it stood out to me so much, especially just being in such stark contrast to how I live my life now. And since kind of shifting to just being more at peace all day, it's just night and day difference. Like most of the small stuff that comes up, like yeah, sometimes it gets me, but overall I'm chilling. I'm going with the flow. Whatever happens, happens. I'm trying to see the good in everything. And again, it comes down to just choosing your response. Nothing really matters in the grand scheme of things. It's not a big deal when you zoom out. Everyone's just doing the best they can with what they have. Everyone's going through their own shit. And so I'm always trying to just be aware of that and understand where people are coming from and see things from their perspective. And when you live in that state of just pure peace and content, nothing can phase you. And that has to be one of the biggest shifts that I've ever made in my life for sure.
Yeah, and I think on the other side too, if you can think about when you see those people that you can tell are just unhappy, or they're just everything they respond to, the way they comment and everything. A lot of times we want to judge them or whatever, but a lot of times it's. Can you imagine like seeing if you respond to them in a very positive way or a real loving way, you never know when that's like, hey, you know what? That's really how I need to be responding. Or I was so angry, I was so bitter towards them, I was so mean to them, and look how they responded to me like in such a great way. You never know how that one response or one interaction is going to change their day or just the way they see things, or maybe a forever change type of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And I think it's easy to want to resist hard things, to wish them away. But again, what if we looked at them as an opportunity? When it comes to fitness, that plateau in your weight loss maybe is not a setback. It's just your body telling you that it needs a new approach. Or if you tried a diet and failed, maybe it wasn't a failure, it was just feedback on what doesn't work for you, or an injury, or some sort of pain that you're feeling. We have clients all the time that are dealing with past injuries or have to go through some unexpected surgery. And it's just a chance to focus on other things. Maybe that's a chance to focus on mobility, on recovery, or just other parts of your health, whether that's diet or just mental health that you were neglecting. We do this all the time with clients as stuff comes up, like we said. And when you start seeing challenges as a chance to grow instead of a reason to quit, that's when you become unstoppable.
Yeah, and this really goes for everything in life, right? Whether it's like relationships or your career or your personal growth. If you always see yourself as that victim of your circumstances, it's really difficult to really get ahead, right? And so instead, ask yourself, what is this teaching me? How can I learn from it? How can I use this? And once you start kind of choosing, like you said, reframing it and having that mindset, then you realize that things are happening like for you. Everything is happening for you, not to you. And so that mindset, I think, encourages you to see those challenges as, opportunities to grow rather than viewing them as things that are just happening to you. It's about believing that every experience, whether it's good or bad, because we're going to experience both, has a purpose and can teach you something valuable. It could be resilience, patience, new skills, and I think in my quest to be still, and that's, I can't remember exactly what it is, but there's a great quote online. I have to find it sometime where like someone's like, I asked God for this and he gave me this. And it's not what he didn't just give it to you, So I often feel like, I'm asking God to be as still as possible. So like, okay, here are a bunch of things that are going to challenge that. And so, learn from these things, then you can be still. And so I think you have to take the, okay, I get it. I got to learn from this. I got to go through this, but I'm going to be better on the other side.
Hmm. One kind of core belief and mindset that I've held for a while is that everything is happening for a reason. It's all leading me closer to where I'm meant to be, and I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be in this moment. I feel like that kind of like that's something I've repeated to myself over and over, and it's just become just. I think that's part of the reason why I kind of have like this general just peace and content, just because I'm trusting that, and I feel like that kind of plays a role into what we're talking about here too.
I mean, no one's really saying it's easy, and like I said, I have my challenges for sure. But every time you make that choice to respond with that ownership, you really reinforce that mindset, right? And over time, it stops feeling like an effort and just becomes like who you are, So it's easy to blame things like genetics or a busy schedule or past struggles for where you are right now. But the real change is going to happen when you stop focusing on what's outside of your control and start owning your choices. And the progress isn't about those perfect circumstances, it's about adapting, learning, and taking action despite them.
Yeah, I always tell clients too, choosing how you respond isn't just a one-time thing either. Kind of like we're saying, it's a constant practice, it's a constant habit that we're working on developing because every day you're going to be faced with those little moments where you get to decide, are you going to hit snooze or get up and train? Are you going to let one stressful moment ruin your whole day, or are you going to take a deep breath, take that pause, and move forward? Are you going to dwell on the things that went wrong or use them to make your next move better? The more you practice choosing the response that serves you, the easier it gets and the more automatic it becomes.
Yeah. All right, let's run through some ways, practical ways that we can choose how to respond like this.
Yep. And number one is going to be very fitting. We've been talking about this whole time, basically, but that's just pause. Create a pause and respond rule. A lot of times people react immediately to the challenges out of emotion, and it's easy to get caught up in that, whether it's frustration, fears, doubt. But instead of reacting, train yourself to pause, zoom out a little bit, and respond intentionally. So when something goes wrong, just take a breath and ask, all right, what is in my control right now? What is the best way to respond that moves me forward? Will this matter a month, a week, a year from now? That slight pause and zooming out can completely shift how you handle setbacks and help you to build better emotional control.
Yeah, and I think this is super underrated. I think just taking that pause before you say something, you know, or even just taking a deep breath before you say something, gives you so many opportunities to think about what you're about to say and how it's going to affect the whole situation.
Yeah, there's so many times because it's so easy when you're just in such an emotionally charged spot to just want to go and like go off. Even when I got started on Twitter, I don't know why this randomly popped into my head, but I would get so triggered by people's comments and just stuff I saw on there, and I'd want to go on and like respond in a way. But if I just give it a few minutes to pause, I'm like, oh, it doesn't matter. That's just dumb. They're insecure, whatever it is. And then I'm like, oh, I'm good. Like, I block and move on. It's just stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay, so number two is kind of audit your internal dialogue, right? The way you talk to yourself really dictates how you respond to the situations. And our inner dialogue is if it's always like, oh, I always mess up, then yeah, what you're doing is you're just reinforcing that failure, but instead, like, oh, you know what, this is just part of the process. So what's my next move? You'll find solutions instead of excuses. Do you ever play chess?
No.
No, I mean I don't play much, but I've played before and I enjoy playing. It's a difficult game. It's a really thinking game. But and hopefully this works. I was trying to think about this. It's kind of like like so in chess, sometimes you sacrifice a piece to get further on in game.
Mm.
And so you might give up like a pawn or a knight or even a queen, right? Which is like golden. You don't want to give up your queen, right? But if you do that, sometimes you gain a larger advantage later on, and that might be hard because like I don't want to lose my pieces, but you're losing them. But if it helps you down the road, it may feel like a loss at that moment, but it's actually like a strategic move that sets you up for a bigger win down the road. And it could be like gaining a more powerful position or setting up a checkmate. And so in life, I feel like same type of thing. We have to let go of some things, right? But it's comfort, security, or even small victories to ultimately gain that something bigger or more important in the long run that we want.
Mm.
So when we start noticing like we're being negative towards ourselves, replace it with like a neutral or more constructive self-talk. I can't do this turns into, man, this is difficult. This is really hard. And we're not saying like be super like, everything is roses type of thing, right? But hey, this is challenging. This is hard. This is difficult, but I can figure it out, right? I failed again. Or change that to like, okay, I learned something that didn't work, now I can learn from this. I can adjust, right? And we're always our hardest critics, we never talk like a lot of times what we tell ourselves, we would never tell family or friends, right? So we want to celebrate the small ones. We just want to show up daily and just keep moving forward.
Yeah, another one is focus on controllables, not circumstances. People waste so much time and energy focusing on things they can't control, whether it's genetics, bad luck, past mistakes. But real progress happens when you shift your focus to what is actually within your power. Yeah, you can't control if someone treats you unfairly, but you can control how you react and whether you let it affect your growth, or if you keep them in your life, even, or
Mm-hmm.
what you choose to say in response to them. You can't control how fast your body responds to fitness, but you can control your consistency. We always talk about this with clients. People say, like, hey, this week I want to lose 2 pounds. I'm like, okay, you can't control that. What you can control is the habits that you're doing, the effort you're putting in every day. Are you hitting your
Exactly.
workouts? Are you hitting your macros? Are you getting your steps in? Are you doing all the other things consistently that are going to get you to that weight loss goal? When you stay solution focused instead of excuse focused, you become unstoppable again.
Yeah. Focus on those controllables. Focus on what you can do and do that and do it consistently.
Mm-hmm.
So the next one is train yourself to see failure in a different way, right? So a lot of us, I'm very guilty of this, I should say, right? We see failure as like proof that we're just not good enough, right? And in reality, I mean, failure just means that we're going to learn something from it. It's feedback, right? So it's our opportunity to learn from it, what doesn't work, so we can adjust and improve. You mess up your diet once, not failure. You miss a week in the gym, it's not failure. The only way you actually fail is if you just quit altogether. That's the only way you're never going to see gains. You just quit, of course, you're not going to get anything done. You know, so we reframe that failure as part of success and not that opposite.
Yeah, I always say all the most successful people have failed the most. I think that's a prerequisite to success in any area of life. You need to fail because it is feedback. That's what's helping you grow and evolve and adjust the plan. If you don't fail, you're not growing. Not just period, end of story.
Hmm. So many stories out there of people that went through multiple failures and now they're just huge successes.
Hmm. Another one is seek out challenges instead of avoiding them. Most people want to run from hard things, but the more you lean into the discomfort, the stronger you become. So if you want more discipline, put yourself in situations where you have to practice that. Or if you want to be mentally tougher, you have to do things that challenge you every single day. 'Cause if you want to be mentally tougher, you have to do things that challenge you every single day. 'Cause if you want to be mentally tougher, you have to do things that challenge you every single day. 'Cause if you want to be mentally tougher, you have to do things that challenge you every single day. 'Cause if you want to be mentally tougher, you have to do things that challenge you every single day. 'Cause if you want to be mentally tougher, you have to do things that challenge you every single day. 'Cause if you want to be mentally tougher, you have to do things that challenge you every single day. 'Cause if you want to be mentally tougher, you have to do things that challenge you every single day. 'Cause if you want to be mentally tougher, you have to do things that challenge you every single day. 'Cause if you want to be mentally tougher, you have to do things that challenge you every single day. 'Cause if you want to be mentally tougher, you have to do things that challenge you every single day. 'Cause if you want to be mentally tougher, you have I think the gym is such a perfect example of this, and why I always say it's the gateway to self improvement, because you don't get stronger by lifting the same weights every day. You get stronger by pushing your limits and progressively overloading. And life works the same way. The more you embrace the hard things, the more capable you become. I love doing this, as I'm sure everyone's caught on to by now. Whenever I'm scared of something, or whenever something is challenging or uncomfortable, I'm like, all right, how can I dive head first into whatever that is? I've been doing that a lot with cold and contrast therapy, and now I actually really enjoy it. Same with why I took on that speech, same with why I wanted to start this podcast. Just every time I feel uncomfortable or notice that I'm scared of something, I'm like, all right, I need to force myself into that to overcome it, to build more discipline, to build that mental toughness, and just to build that confidence in myself.
Yeah, and you guys out there can correct me if I'm wrong. I might totally mess this up, but there's a story. I think it was about Hercules where he came to a path, and there's like two goddesses, and one promises him like everything he could ever want. He's like, life's gonna be easy. Come down this road, come down this path. You'll have power, you'll have fame, you'll have riches, you'll have everything you could ever want. And the other goddess is like, I can't promise anything on any of that, but I can promise that it's going to be challenging, it's going to be difficult, but you're going to learn a lot from it, and you're going to become stronger because of it, mentally, physically, emotionally. I don't know the end result of that, but I can tell you it's going to be hard and it's going to be challenging, but you are going to come out on the other end such a better person for it. And that's the path he chooses, even though most people are like, oh, I'm going to go down that left path of just everything. He learned so much from that, and he was gained, invaluable lessons from that made him the person that he became at the end.
I love that. An easy life is not a good life. I've said that so many times, but it really is true.
All right. So, and then the last one, right? I guess this is the last one that we want to talk about. So don't confuse like ownership with perfection. So taking ownership doesn't mean that you're never going to mess up. It means that when you do mess up, you own it, you adjust, you move forward. Instead of making the excuses, you realize, hey, I don't need to be perfect. People don't expect me to be perfect. We don't have to have it all figured out. And again, people can't relate to either if you come across as knowing everything and that, you're just perfect. None of us are like that, right? So we just need to commit to better responding or responding better each time, right? So the goal is, again, progress, not perfection. Take that pressure off yourself. You don't have to be perfect. No one expects you to be, and you just keep moving forward. At the end of the day, life is always going to throw you challenges, all right? And it's how you respond that's what's in control, right? You're in control of how you respond to that. So if you're struggling with something right now, whether it's fitness, your mindset, career, relationships, don't wait for things to happen to you. Don't let for something externally to happen, to change. You have to change how you respond to it. Take the ownership, take the action, and then watch how things will start to change. Your life will start to shift in the right way.
Yeah, I'd like to challenge everyone. Think of one area in your life where you feel like you're stuck or not quite where you want to be. And one, acknowledge kind of where you're at. Like I said, take ownership of that, but choose one action item and make it very small and manageable, but take one action item to start getting yourself out of it. So just pick one thing, start small, and take action on that, and watch how much your life transformed just from taking that first step. And if you're looking for a space for like minded people working towards the same journey as you, that's exactly why we built a private school community. I'm posting new content in there every week. We're running challenges, and you get access to all kinds of resources, workouts, meal guides, and expert guidance. And it's completely free to join. So I will link that in the show notes. And if anyone does want to come to the conference and watch me speak, I do have a code and a link for that that will actually get you $100 off your ticket as well. So I will link that as well for anyone that wants to either watch me crush it or thoroughly embarrass myself. Either way, it will be a great time. But yeah, share this with someone who needs to hear it. And thanks as always for tuning in. We will see you guys next week.